So, our first speaker for this morning is Jonas Damon. He is the person who said one of his favorite objects is the 6-inch machinist square. It was the first required tool for Metals 1 at RISD. Or Playmobil, because they were his favorite toy when he was a kid. But his most favorite object, it turned out, was used passports, because they are tangible artifacts of exploration, experience, and storytelling. Jonas is a creative director at Frog, a global innovation firm. He leads a cross-disciplinary design team focused on user experience, as seen through the lens of product design. Having worked both in the US and the UK after a German upbringing gives Jonas an international perspective on design. Jonas holds a degree from the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island, and spent time as a visiting critic and instructor at the École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs in France and the Royal College of Art in London. Parallel to Frog, Jonas designs a line of products under his own name in New York City for this New York City-based Areaware. His Areaware 2B radio was recently featured on the Dieter Rams retrospective, Less is More, at the SFMOMA, San Francisco. Please help me welcome Jonas Damon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. This is a much more thorough introduction than I expected, so I've got a bit of redundant information here, right? So I think by now you already know that my name happens to be Jonas. You might also know that I'm a creative director at Frog, which is a global innovation firm. What that means is we create a lot of products and services, experiences, mainly through industrial design, through interaction design, technology, et cetera. It's all kind of big-sounding stuff. But more significantly, maybe I still design for myself. You know, at night when I put my 2 kids to bed, on the weekends when I'd rather not be outside with friends, I kind of go into a little model shop and I build stuff and I make stuff. It's a bit of an experimentation, it's a bit of a laboratory, it's a way for me to really do my own research, which I then bring back to me at Frog as well. And I'm going to talk about what I call the responsive object, and it's really about connections. It's about having connections with objects, us having a relationship with objects, and objects kind of talking back to us. And that can happen in many different ways with many different kinds of objects. I'm going to start talking about very simple, basic objects, which might have a very high emotional value to us. And then I'm going to sort of transition to talking about objects that are a bit more complex, that have technology, and then the final little bit is where it's a complete system. But still, what's most important in all of these, and this big range, is that is the connection we have with them, and that when all these things were designed, I didn't, or my team and I didn't set out to necessarily design the object, but we set out to design a connection, and we set out to design the atmosphere around these objects, and as an artifact, then the final thing was left over. But it's really the experience you have with the object. Okay, does that make sense? I'm going to start with some clocks. I've heard clocks a bunch of times last night and just this morning. And my realization about the importance of connection with objects came when I was thinking about clocks. I've always loved clocks because they change and they give us information in a very passive way. I love numbers, and I was thinking quite a bit about these clocks, about alarm clocks, and what do they really mean in terms of this system of numbers that we put together to talk about something that exists, time. And so I designed a clock myself. This is called the numbers clock because it's got numbers. And what I did there is I wanted to deconstruct a clock. What does it mean? What is it made up of? And the essence of a clock is numbers, right? and that's maybe the essence of time as well. And I designed this, and each of the numbers of time is in a separate little cube. And we launched it as a product, and I was kind of curious to see what would happen with this, if people would do the same thing that was sort of driving this design. And indeed, a couple days ago when I put this together, I looked through the internet, and there's a bunch of pictures that I found of people uploading photographs of this clock that they own, and how they personalized it, how they made it speak to them, how they quite often even created a code, right? If you rearrange those little cubes, the way the time is sort of represented no longer really makes sense, except if you know which cube goes to where. And all of a sudden, let's see if this is kind of a powerful product. We have a strong connection to our particular version of that clock. This is my favorite. And I never thought somebody would think of doing this. This is a chocolate store in Singapore. And they just kind of went bonkers with this whole idea that time is really just a very orderly way of arranging numbers, I'd love to know what time it is right now, and it's kind of nuts. So that's sort of like the extreme part of that, and it's just wonderful how the owners of this sort of really have made this connection and created their own thing with these objects or this object. So moving on, this is, I'm sure you all know, this is it's a phone. It's also a calendar. It's photo album. You can write stuff on it. It's a lot, and that leaves me kind of cold. It's kind of everything and nothing. It's a black slab. Yet it's so important in our lives, and what it also is it's a clock. It's an alarm clock, actually, and I know this because again, you look on the internet and it's everywhere. You see these pictures here, and I've asked around, what do you use as your alarm clock? How do you wake up? On my iPhone. And as a designer, I look at this and it's kind of a bit of a horror to me. It seems like there's been no consideration to the object. It's really about the function. This thing will wake me up. It tells super accurate time, which is all fair and good, but there's nothing about sort of the beauty of an object in any of these, and I kind of want to change that. And I too use an iPhone as my alarm clock, so that's not going to go away. So how can I create something that's going to make it a bit more meaningful? This year is meaningful to me. I think a lot of us older people maybe, woke up to things like this. This isn't the most beautiful example of what I feel is an alarm clock, but it certainly has a message that it's an alarm clock. And so then I created this thing here, which is a block of wood. It's a block of wood with a hole for a cable, and it fits an iPhone. And so there's this symbiotic relationship between the two, because it's just really a block of wood, but then you put your iPhone in it, and all of a sudden it's transformed into what for me is an alarm clock. Now we're talking. Now I will let myself get woken up by this. And that resonated quite a bit. I think all my friends have one at least, and so it's I think what's out of us is kind of a silly idea of augmenting something that's already existing and giving it more soul, perhaps. It kind of works, and then so I did that for a couple of other similar products. This sort of very sleek slab. We all know what it is, of course, and it is advertised as something to view movies and TVs on, and whoa, but again, it's sort of the cultural capital of that is kind of lost, just holding a cold slab and consuming content is a bit one-sided. Physicality for me is very important. And again, it's showing my age here. This is part of the viewing experience is really the object that brings you that content. And so I played some more, and I built a little enclosure for the iPad. It's my little daughter on the left there, enjoying TV in a way that she ordinarily wouldn't nowadays. And that kind of wrapped up in a series of what I called, what did I call these things? Analog form. And there's a radio in there as well, but I think sort of you get the message of what it took for me to have a stronger connection to these slabs that are so important to us these days. And that's all kind of fun and games, but having some kind of an emotional connection like that is also much more, can be much more important and much more serious. This year's a house fire that was started by stove fire, maybe a frying pan, gave a roll of paper towels got too close to the stove or something. Pretty serious stuff. And a number of years ago, I worked for a man named Peter Arnell, and he was quite passionate about fire safety. And we worked on a fire extinguisher. And the problem with fire extinguishers is that they're tools, basically, right? It's equipment meant to combat fire. And as a tool, you keep it, you put it where you keep tools, under the counter, in a closet, away. And that's maybe the wrong approach, really, for what this thing is supposed to do. And he realized that. And so we designed something that wasn't a tool anymore. It made it a little bit more important. It elevated its meaning in our lives a little bit. And we designed the fire extinguisher as an appliance, as a kitchen appliance, so that you would have it on your counters. You'd want it on your counters. It would feel at home on your kitchen counter, right next to the toaster and the coffee machine. I mean, it looks a little bit like a coffee machine, or it looks like something that maybe after you make your coffee, that's how you get the foamy milk into your coffee. But again, the kitchen being such an emotional environment, it made complete sense to transfer that onto something as important as a fire extinguisher. So that's a little bit more serious than the little wooden things I showed, and a little bit more sophisticated, right? And I'm going to continue that progression, getting a little bit more sophisticated and showing how objects still have can have a connection to you, maybe a little bit less emotional, but in keeping this in the theme of kitchens, this is now some frog work. A year ago or so, one of our clients, GE as a matter of fact, they have a platform called Eco-Imagination, right, which is about efficiency. It's about making things more efficient. It's their sustainability platform, but it's not about recycling or reusing as much as getting more with what we already have, doing more with less. And they asked us, and it's an industrial platform of theirs, so they've got train locomotives, they've got power plants, they've got big facilities where if they can eke out a couple more percent of efficiency, there's a lot of gain. And they asked us, well, how can we talk about this for consumer products? How can we bring eco-imagination to the realm of the consumer product? And that's all they asked us, and they left it open to us how we want to interpret that. And we thought about the kitchen because it is such a meaningful place. It's something we can all relate to. It's something that we use every single day. If we could make this environment more efficient, that could mean something. Looking at the kitchen, this is kind of maybe a typical kitchen. There's a lot of appliances, right? And if you look at these appliances, what you can start to notice is that they're all kind of the same, right? They do different functions, sort of, but there's a lot of redundancy there. There's every single one of those has a power plug. Every single one of those has a number of electronic components that regulate that power. The blender and the food processor and the coffee grinder, they've all got motors, right? The toaster and a slow cooker, they all generate heat. Yet there's 6 or so products that are like that, and we're like, wow, this is a lot of redundant systems here. We can cut down on that, and if we cut down on that, we can win. We can make a more efficient environment. So we thought, okay, let's make a multifunctional device and appliance, which is a terrible idea, actually, because it's like Swiss Army knives. Multifunctional things are really never that great, and that's kind of the importance of this all. Is how do we make something that's multifunctional not a minus, but make it a plus? How can we make it a positive? How can we create a connection between the system and us that is positive? And again, here's sort of the basic concept of what we were sort of thinking, what's going on in our heads. We saw these sort of traditional things, slow cooker and fan and blender, and you see how all the little orange bits and bobs there are kind of the same, and blue parts have the same things as well. And well, what if you consolidate all those into just one device, and then you make all the parts that have to be individual and unique, you make them simple, you make them dumb. So that way, when this gets made in China, you use less plastic, you use less metal, fewer motors, fewer transistors and resistors and fancy bits, and you ship less of that around the world, so you save, the little boat saves on oil, and you put it in your apartment, and you can have a smaller kitchen because you've got smaller things. So it kind of made a lot of sense for their platform. So this concept, we call it Switch, Ecomagination Switch, and it's the world's first smart appliance hub. That's what we called it, right? And the idea is that what's on there now is a kettle. Behind that, you can see a blender and a coffee maker and a slow cooker. And I probably didn't have to explain what each of those are, because you probably recognize them, and we were very deliberate about that. Cooking has so many associations, so much history, so much tradition. It's something we love to love. And so in introducing this brand new concept, we wanted to stick with something that's known. We wanted to create that connection between everything, all the positive things that cooking that we associate with cooking. We wanted to keep that. We didn't want to abandon that for sake of the future. The future we could sort of contain in the actual little device there. So we kept that sort of quite modern and sleek and aluminum and shiny and black and glossy like an iPhone and all that stuff. In the middle there, there's a little spinning thing. You put a blender on that, or you put a food processor on that. It'll spin. The round bit is an induction heater. It heats via induction, which I'm not going to go into what that technology is, but it's a really efficient way of heating things. You have to believe me on that. But then again, that's still just the hardware, right? That's not really the meaningful part of this. What's meaningful is that, again, and I was saying how this is a multifunctional device now, and how we generally, multifunctional things, other than iPhones, are kind of a bad thing because they do a lot of things but nothing really well, right? Well, this one here, to change that pattern, we put in specific technology that when you put on the blender top, the machine turns on, and the interface shows you only the controls for a blender. So you got the green thing there is a pulse on-off button. The OLED screen shows you variable speed. So all of a sudden, it's no longer a multifunctional device. It's a dedicated device. So you put the blender on, and it knows you put on the blender. So say you put on the slow cooker. All of a sudden, it's funny, it knows that you put the slow cooker on. So you don't really have to do any thinking. It thinks for you. It's got a relationship with you. So there are the controls, right? 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. And the way we achieve that is with RFID technology. Each of those cooking vessels has a little chip in it that tells the bottom device, which has an antenna, what is being put on there. So not only does it know what's being put on there, and it helps you to not get confused. It'll also tell the device that the water is already boiling or that the food is already done, and then it turns it off for you automatically, so you don't have to turn it off, and it'll save electricity. So it helps you. So what do I have here? It can even be a fan, right? So you really want this to be an open platform to do anything that you may want to do in a kitchen, in case you burn your food or something like that, and blow all the air out. And this is an example of what I would say is creating a connection with an intelligent device, or having the device think on your behalf and make life easy for you. And then we even built in smaller stuff like this. And again, it's kind of about the device knowing you. I love to wake up with coffee, the smell of coffee. So a lot of coffee makers now, they have delayed start settings or whatever, right? You put on the pot at night, you go to bed, and you wake up and your coffee's ready. Well, what if you had a long night, you went out, you drank a little bit too much, you're hungover the next morning, you set this thing for 8 o'clock, and the alarm rings, and you don't want to get up, but you still want to have coffee. Well, you can roll over and take your iPhone off that little wooden block, and you can program it to actually start the coffee maybe 2 hours later. So that's a way technology can help you. You can start to rely on this and build that connection with this kind of technology. And it's boiling water. I'm sure you all know what boiling water looks like. So, and then my final sort of little thingy I want to show, and I'm not going to talk too much during this. The city just launched a competition a couple months ago to reinvent our payphones, and a lot of people are wondering, well, we don't even need payphones, you know. Everyone has an iPhone in their pocket, outdated. I don't think so. I'm a New Yorker. I love New York City, and I see their function. I can imagine their function. It's an intrinsic part of the city. This is, if you will, this project is sort of at Frog our ode to New York City. A little funny thing. They were supposed to announce a short list yesterday. Apparently, because of an overwhelming response, they didn't make the announcement. So I have no idea if we're down selected or not. They're going to tell sometime next week. So I don't even know if I'm allowed to show this really, but I can't help myself. I just wanted to sort of finish my little presentation with an example of how even something that's really sophisticated, how these things still interact with all sorts of different people in all sorts of different circumstances, how you can depend and rely on an object such as a public payphone in the city of New York.
Residents and 50 million tourists a year, nearly 20,000 restaurants, over 12,000 miles of sidewalk, more than 13,000 yellow cabs, and 200,000 small businesses. And as many as 800 languages are spoken here. This is New York City. We've had public payphones for well over 100 years. More than 11,000 dot the city today. When these payphones are renewed in 2014, their replacement can help our city become more accessible, safer, healthier, greener, and better informed. Inspired by our city, we created Beacon, made of the city, by the city, and for its people. Beacon is the next generation public communications hub, a purposeful icon that expands its surroundings by offering the intelligent simplicity and reliable utility New Yorkers expect from their city's infrastructure, both for today and for tomorrow. While Beacon features the familiar cues of a public phone, we don't have to insert coins or touch buttons. and we don't have to pick up a receiver. We control it with our voice and with our gestures. The directional microphones hear us, but nothing else. Beacon's noise-canceling technologies drown out ambient sounds and let the directional speakers communicate only with us. New York is the world's metropolis, but the individual communities of New York are its lifeblood. Beacon expands these communities by keeping them informed. It offers local news, maps, and directions. It is every city block's messaging board and helps the local businesses get their words out with hyper-local advertising, from Jacques Torres chocolates to Hudson Street food trucks, or from a lost pet to an Amber Alert. In October 2012, we were reminded of our need for a clear, reliable communication from the city and its emergency services when Superstorm Sandy hit the New York City region. Beacon is here in these times to tell us what is happening down the block and around the city, and when, where, and how to evacuate. Built to be fail-safe with redundant technologies, copper cable, fiber optics, and Wi-Fi, and with solar cells that trickle charge Beacon, so even in a power outage, it serves up-to-date information on its energy-efficient LED matrix display. Beacon lends a hand in all situations. Police and fire signals are visible and immediate, and signaling for cabs is made easier than ever. While Beacon's visibility is at home with our skyline, its slender profile is scaled for the sidewalk. Because space in New York is limited, it's an efficient bystander, but gives us the personal space we desire when using it. Beacon was designed to connect New York City with New Yorkers with businesses, businesses with visitors, and visitors with New York City. Beacon is an exercise in reduction, taking everything that is chaotic, colorful, and loud about New York City and connecting it back to us in an intelligent, purposeful, and familiar way.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Jonsara just leaned over and said that was a damn good competition entry.